scary stories.
Every night, I share a story that most people wouldn't dare to tell. If you're listening, you're already one of us. And if you haven't subscribed yet, that's okay. But just know, every new subscriber brings me one step closer to building a safe place for the one person I love most, my mother. So if you enjoy these haunted tales, press that button, and maybe, just maybe, you'll be the reason the next story finds a happier ending. I hadn't seen another car for over an hour. The road wound through dense woodland like a fading memory, its yellow lines worn to ghosts. With every passing mile, the trees grew taller, darker, as if whispering among themselves about my presence. GPS gave up 20 minutes ago. I drove on instinct now, following the directions scribbled in my journal. Left at the mossy stone, right at the crooked fence, keep going till the road stops. It felt like something out of an old folktale. But I needed this. Needed to get away from everything. From noise, from people, from myself. My name is Ethan Walker. I'm a photographer. Or I was. I guess I still am, technically. After the gallery failed and my last exhibition was panned by critics for being too sterile, I lost the spark. The city smothered me with its expectations. So when I found the listing for an isolated cabin in Black Hollow, cheap, remote, and quiet, it felt like fate was offering me a second shot. The trees thinned suddenly, and there it was. The cabin. 2 stories of weathered wood, shuttered windows, and a sagging roof that made it look like it was frowning. It stood at the edge of a small clearing, like it had been waiting just for me. Behind it, the forest loomed, thick and endless. I cut the engine. Silence wrapped around me. No birds, no wind, just the sound of my own breath. The door creaked like a horror movie cliché as I stepped inside, but the place wasn't as bad as I expected. Dusty, sure, but clean. The living room had a stone fireplace, old books on sagging shelves, and a leather armchair that looked like it hadn't moved in a decade. There were 2 bedrooms upstairs, a kitchen with mismatched cabinets, and, most interestingly, a large mirror leaning against the hallway wall, covered with a white sheet. I didn't touch it, out of respect, or superstition. I'm not sure. I unpacked my camera gear and journal, left the phone in airplane mode. It was useless. Here, no signal, no distractions, just me in the woods. I told myself I'd spend the next 2 months photographing nature, reconnecting, maybe even healing. That night, I heard the first tap, just one, on the window behind the kitchen sink. I laughed it off. Probably a branch, or an animal. Still, I double-checked. Nothing was there. I drove into the nearest town the next morning. Fair Hollow. It was about 20 minutes from the cabin if you don't take a wrong turn. The town had 1 diner, 1 gas station, and a general store run by a woman named Delilah. She gave me a long, slow stare as I paid for coffee and batteries. "You're staying out in Black Hollow?" she asked. I nodded. "Rented the old cabin," she hesitated, her hands frozen mid-scan over the counter. "You planning to stay long?" "Couple months." "Why?" Delilah looked down. "Just don't stay out past dark. Folks say the forest changes after sundown. Can't say I believe it, but better to be safe." Her words stuck with me all the way back. The second tap came, that night. 2 knocks. Slightly louder, more intentional. Again, nothing outside. But this time, my camera, left pointed at the window, had recorded a glitch. A flicker. 1 frame of distortion that looked eerily like a shadow. I blamed the equipment. Old lens, cold air. But I didn't sleep well. The silence out here wasn't peaceful. It was absolute. Like the world itself held its breath after sundown. I started writing in my journal more. Not just notes for photography, but thoughts, emotions, dreams. One dream kept recurring. I was walking in the woods at night. A figure followed, always behind me. I never saw it, but I always woke up sweating, heart racing, the sound of distant tapping still ringing in my ears. A week passed. I explored the woods during daylight, took hundreds of photos, moss on bark, the way fog clung to branches like spider webs, deer tracks near the stream. But something was off in every image, a blur in the distance, a shadow not cast by anything visible. I began marking these anomalies in my journal. Then I found the cellar door. It was under a rug in the living room, nearly flush with the floorboards. I hadn't noticed it before. The handle was rusted, but the lock had been broken long ago. I didn't open it. Not yet. I told myself it could wait. That night, the tapping returned. 3 knocks. Then a pause. Then 3 more. A pattern. That time. I didn't check the window. I started hearing things, not just taps or creaks, but whispers. Faint, as if coming through the walls. My name sometimes, or words I couldn't understand. I recorded hours of audio at night. Most of it was static, but one night I caught something, a voice, raspy, soft, repeating, "He's here." The camera glitched again. One frame, like before, a blur. This time it looked like the outline of a tall figure outside the window. I covered the mirror in the hallway with a second sheet. I wasn't sleeping much anymore. The journals started changing. I flipped through my entries to find several I didn't remember writing. Pages filled with looping phrases. It's waking up. The woods listen. Don't look at the mirror. The handwriting was mine, but off. Like it was rushed, shaking. I tried to brush it off as stress, isolation, but a part of me knew. Something was wrong with the cabin. Something was wrong with me. I walked past the mirror one morning. The sheet had slipped. Just a little. Enough to see my own reflection. But something was wrong with it. I was frozen in place, staring. But my reflection didn't move. It stood there, unmoving, eyes slightly wider, lips curved upward in the faintest suggestion of a smile. I yanked the sheet back down. I left the house that afternoon and walked the woods until dark. I didn't take any pictures. I just walked, trying to hear my own thoughts. But the forest was too quiet, as if it were listening. That night, I wrote a letter. To no one in particular, maybe to myself. I wrote, "If I disappear, if something happens to me, this place is not empty. It's not silent. It sees me. It waits. I don't know what it wants, but I think it's waking up." Then I placed the letter inside my camera. Bag, the tapping returned. 4 knocks, the loudest yet. I stayed still, lights off, breathing shallow. The knock stopped, replaced by a long, dragging sound across the wall outside. I didn't check. Not this time. I couldn't ignore the cellar door anymore. After another sleepless night filled with creaks and murmurs, I stood over it with a flashlight and crowbar. The cabin had shifted around me. Sounds I once brushed off now carried purpose. Even the air felt heavier. The rug peeled back easily. The metal ring groaned in protest as I pulled. Dust and cold air surged upward from below. My flashlight struggled to cut through the blackness. Wooden stairs descended into the earth. Faint carvings were scratched into the walls. Symbols I didn't recognize. Some looked ancient. Others resembled eyes, watching. I stepped down slowly. The cellar was small, damp, with earthen walls. The floor was stone, partly flooded, but in the center stood something that didn't belong, a tall mirror, ornate, framed in blackened wood carved with curling designs, like vines choking something. It hadn't been covered. I didn't look directly at it. Something in me screamed not to. Back upstairs, I reviewed the last few shots from my forest excursions. They weren't what I remembered capturing. One photo, taken near the creek, showed someone standing in the background, a blurry, shadowy figure. I zoomed in. It wore clothes like mine, but its arms were too long. The face was smudged, distorted, like a smear on glass. Another image was worse. It showed me, my back turned, standing in front of the cabin, but I never asked for a timed shot. I never stood like that, and I was holding something. The mirror. Except the mirror was still in the cellar, wasn't it? I checked. It was. I didn't go back down. I began losing track of time. One evening I sat down to write in my journal, only to find 4 pages already filled with looping, desperate phrases. All in my handwriting, all saying the same thing. Don't let it in. Don't let it in. I couldn't remember writing it. The clock started glitching. My wristwatch froze at 3:03 every night. I'd wake up gasping, cold sweat pouring down my back. The knocking was gone now. Something worse replaced it. Breathing, from the other side of the bedroom wall. Deep, rhythmic. As if something large and ancient was resting there, waiting to move. I began leaving the house before sunset. I wandered, deeper into the forest than ever before. It felt safer than the cabin. There, I found a tree unlike the others. Tall, dead, scorched black. Its bark was split, like lightning had struck it long ago. But it wasn't charred. It was pulsing. No birds sang near it. No insects moved. I raised my camera and took a single photo. The screen flickered. Error, lens malfunction. Then the photo appeared. The tree stood in the center, but someone was behind it, peeking. Just the edge of a face, wide, hollow eyes. A mouth too thin. I turned and ran. The forest felt tighter, closer, like it didn't want me to leave. The whispers in the house changed. They started using my name. Then came a familiar voice. My mother's. She's been dead for 5 years. Ethan, she called gently through the floorboards, like she used to when dinner was ready. Come downstairs, sweetheart. I stood at the top of the cellar steps. Her voice continued, warm and sweet. But it wasn't her. It was something wearing her sound. I closed the door and locked it. That night, I dreamed again. In the dream, I stood in front of the mirror downstairs. The sheet had blown off, but it was windless. My reflection smiled at me. Too wide, teeth too many, eyes too dark. I tried to look away but couldn't. Then the reflection moved. Not me, just it. It reached out from the glass, touched mine. I woke up screaming. The sheets were soaked. My hands were wet with mud from the cellar floor. The journal no longer belonged to me. New pages filled themselves overnight. One entry read, I see through his eyes now. I wear him like skin. Another. He opened the door. He looked at the mirror. Now we wait. I flipped back to my original entries. Some were gone. Others rewritten. A section I remembered detailing my first hike now said, the forest took a piece of him today. He doesn't know it yet. I tore out the pages, burned them in the fireplace, but the next morning they were back, perfectly placed. I returned to Fair Hollow. Delilah wouldn't speak to me. The gas station clerk stared as if I had 2 heads. A man outside the diner said, You went to the Hollow? I nodded. He shook his head slowly. Then you brought it back." I asked what he meant, but he just walked away. The air in the cabin changed. It felt thicker, warmer, as if breathed by something unseen. I sat at my desk, trying to write, and felt it brush past me, an invisible presence, too cold, too quiet. Then, fingers, soft and slow, dragging across the back of my neck. I spun around. No one. But my camera, accidentally recording, caught it. Frame by frame, I saw my own head jerk forward slightly. Then the curtain in the corner move on its own, and a shadow fall over me. But there was no light source, no object to cast it. I tried to leave, packed my car, grabbed only what mattered. I drove for 2 hours straight down the old road, but I ended up back at the cabin. No turns, no detours, just there again, like the road looped, like the world had folded in on itself. The cabin sat waiting, chimney smoking gently. I never lit a fire that day. I sat on the porch that night, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the stars that refused to blink. I whispered, "What do you want?" The forest didn't answer. The mirror didn't reply. But inside me, a slow, heavy feeling unfurled. Not fear, not yet, but inevitability. I saw myself. Not in a mirror. Not in a photo. Not a dream. He stood outside the cabin in the fog, same clothes, same stance, same everything, except he waved at me, not in a friendly way. It was slow, mocking. I ran outside, but the yard was empty, not even footprints. But when I came back in, the front door was already open. I had locked it. The whispers moved inside me. They weren't in the walls anymore. They threaded into my thoughts. Not like voices, but echoes of what I was thinking. Before I thought it. I'd think I should get out, and then the echo would say, "You can't. You never could." I couldn't tell where my thoughts ended and its thoughts began. I woke up standing in the cellar, barefoot, shirtless, the mirror uncovered, mud on my feet, dust on my hands. I don't remember coming down. I don't remember opening my eyes. I only remember one thing before waking. I was smiling in the reflection, but I wasn't smiling. My phone rang. It was my mother's number. She's been gone for years. "The number disconnected long ago," I answered. The static was thick, but beneath it, a music box playing my childhood lullaby. Then a voice, childlike, my own. "I saw what you did in the mirror, Ethan. You let him out." The line went dead. When I checked my call log, it didn't exist. One morning I opened the bathroom door and found trees. Not a dream. The inside of the bathroom had become woods. Damp, moss-covered. Black trees with no leaves, no ceiling, only sky. I stepped inside. The floor was soft earth. The mirror above the sink was now nailed to a tree. I turned around. The door was gone. Only when I touched the mirror did the cabin return. I vomited for the first time in days. The journal began to change more aggressively. Pages turned wet. Words began to smear into blood-red ink. One night I found a phrase scrawled across every page. "He wears you now." I tried burning it again. This time the flames wouldn't catch. Paper refused to burn. I threw it into the lake. Next morning, it was on my bed, open to a page I didn't write. "You only delayed him." I went to the nearby town again, desperate for contact. Delilah wouldn't even look at me. The bookstore owner pretended not to know me. When I looked in the window reflection, I understood why. My face had changed, not dramatically, subtly, eyes too deep set, skin too pale, a shadow beneath my chin that didn't match the light. I spoke to a child who recoiled in horror. "Mom, his mouth's wrong," she whispered. The mirror in the cellar began making sounds, not words, breathing, crying, scratching. One night, I heard my voice screaming from inside it. Then, silence. Then, laughter. It wasn't human. It spoke to me directly, not aloud, but through everything. A photo frame cracked, and the split lines formed symbols I saw in my dreams. A crow landed on my porch and whispered, "You were chosen. You were opened." I screamed at it. It tilted its head and replied, "Screaming only makes him stronger." Then it pecked at its own eyes until they bled and flew away. I woke up in the forest, naked. Carved into my chest were letters, ETH, and the A was missing, like my name was erasing itself, like I was no longer me, like he was winning. I dreamed I was inside the mirror, except it didn't feel like a dream. Everything was reversed. Colors dull, air heavy like soup. Shadows clung to the ceiling. I could hear myself in the real world, crying out, but I couldn't move. My body was outside. Something else was inside with me. It leaned over and whispered, "You see now. This is your gift." I woke up back in bed, but the blanket smelled of rot, and my hands were mirrored. Left was right. Delilah called me, crying, "Ethan, please don't come near me again. Whatever you said yesterday was cruel, and I don't know what game you're playing, but don't ever say those things to me again." I never saw her yesterday. Someone wearing my face did. Every reflective surface now shows something slightly wrong. Mirrors, water, my camera lens. Sometimes I see multiple versions of myself, staring back with different expressions. One weeping, one grinning, one bleeding. I taped every mirror in the cabin. It didn't help. Now I see reflections in the windows, even at night. I lost a whole day, no memory, nothing recorded. I woke up with blood under my nails, mud in my mouth. The cellar door wide open. The mirror was gone. At night I hear footsteps upstairs, but I'm the only one here. They follow a pattern. Slow. Heavy. Then they stop. Above my room, directly overhead. Sometimes the floor groans like someone is kneeling, listening, breathing. Clocks don't move anymore. Sometimes they jump forward 5 hours. Other times they spin backward until I vomit. One night, I watched a whole sunset. In 3 seconds, the sky blinked. I blinked too. And it was night again. I don't know what day it is. The calendar changed itself. All the dates say unmade. The journal, the one I threw in the lake, burned, shredded, is back on the table again. Now, it answers me. I wrote, "What are you?" It wrote back, instantly, "The mirror of what you could become." I wrote, "Why me?" It replied, "You're not the first, just the first to last this long." I opened the hallway closet and found the kitchen. Inside, I turned around. The living room was gone. In its place was the cellar. The walls breathe now. The wallpaper peels, revealing pulsing veins beneath. I taped a map of the cabin to track it, but the map changes every time I blink. I sleep, but I don't dream my dreams anymore. I dream others. A woman trapped in a dark hallway, crawling. A boy, watching his own funeral. A man screaming as mirrors collapse inward on him. I know none of them, but I feel them dying, and when I wake, I whisper names I've never heard. One stuck with me, Nathaniel Crow. I tried calling Delilah again. A man answered, raspy, cold. She doesn't remember you anymore. That's how it starts. He hung up. I drove to her bookstore. It was gone. In its place, a burned-out ruin. Ashes and walls melted into trees. Asked a passing woman what happened. She said, "That place burned down 10 years ago. I opened a drawer and found it filled with dead birds. Their heads all facing the same way. But then, I blinked. Gone." Next, a cabinet revealed a window, not a normal one. Through it, I saw me, standing in a different version of this cabin, staring back. He was smiling. I wasn't. I found a tape recorder labeled Ethan's Voice, July 4th. I don't remember recording it. I don't remember ever owning it. I played it. My voice said, "Don't believe what you see. The moment you trust it, he finishes the copy." I asked the recorder, "What does that mean?" It replied in my voice, but distorted and reversed. "Soon you'll speak only lies." The more I resist, the more he becomes me. He walks like me now, speaks like me. My memories, my childhood, my fears. I saw him again in the mirror. He blinked before I did. He scratched something into the glass. "You will beg for forgetting." I found a Polaroid on the cabin floor. It shows me standing in the woods, smiling, with Delilah beside me. She's holding my hand. It's dated 2 days ago. I haven't left the cabin in weeks, and Delilah is supposed to be gone. I flipped the photo. Written in red ink, she remembers now. At night, I hear them whispering again. I pressed my ear to the wall and felt warm breath. Dozens of voices now, speaking over each other, moaning, chanting. They say one word again and again. Replace. Then, they laugh. The drywall cracked, and a mouth opened. My memories aren't mine anymore. I remember places I've never been. A tall tower with no doors. A lake of screaming hands. Worse, I don't remember some of my real past. I tried recalling my childhood dog's name. I heard another name in my head. Cloak. That wasn't a dog. That was something else. Something that used to wear me. I stared into the cellar mirror again, this time determined to smash it. But as I lifted the hammer, my reflection raised it first, faster than me. He struck his side. Of the mirror, it cracked, but on my side, I bled. From the head, glass embedded in my forehead. The written word is wrong now. Newspapers, cereal boxes, my notes, they change when I'm not looking. One day the front page read, "Ethan Walker, 33, survived by none. Missing since 1992. I'm not that old, or am I? When I checked again, the paper had no text at all, only a black spiral. They've been dead for years. But last night, they were in the kitchen, talking. I didn't go in. I stood outside and listened. They were discussing my replacement. He's almost done. The skin fits now. Let him see us next time. It'll speed the process." I ran. When I returned, they were gone. But a note on the table read, "We'll always be proud of him." The stars blink now, like eyes. The moon changes shape during the same night. At midnight it was full. By 3 a.m., it was a crescent. Then, it opened, not a moon, a mouth. It whispered, "Time to come inside." The trees hum now. At night, they pulse in static. White noise filling the air like invisible fog. I put my ear against the window once. The trees whispered, "Only one Ethan will leave. I can't go near the forest anymore." The branches reach when I pass. Sometimes they wave. I see myself. Not in mirrors now, but in real time. He walks. Behind me. I turn fast enough to catch only his shadow. He mimics my cough, my steps, my voice. but he smiles too much. I'm starting to lose track of whether I am the original, or if I already became him. I found letters on my bed, dated from the future, postmarked from the replaced world, year unknown. Inside was my handwriting, or something that knew how to write like me. By the time you read this, you've already lost the battle. He writes this, not you. Another note read, "Your bones are almost compatible. Soon, he'll wear you without effort." There was never a basement. Now, a staircase winds downward where the pantry used to be. I stood at the top. A faint red light pulsed from below, and whispering, too many voices. They chanted, "This is where Ethan ends." I didn't go down. Yet when I blinked, I was at the bottom. All the framed photos in the cabin, my parents, me and Delilah, my graduation, are changing. I saw one where my head was replaced by the smiling version of me. Another had Delilah's face scratched out, replaced with a spiral. One photo pulsed slightly. I touched it. It felt warm. It blinked. I tried to burn the journal again. It screamed. Loud, like a person. I dropped it and it fell open to a page that hadn't existed before. Written in blood. "Sign here to leave, or stay and be unmade." Underneath was a signature line, but the name was already signed. Ethan. I looked into the mirror this morning. There was no reflection. Not mine. Not his. Only a black hallway stretching endlessly, with doors on both sides, and one figure at the very end. Not moving, watching, waiting. I whispered, "Who are you?" It whispered back, from the mirror, "I'm the version of you that never looked away." The cabin sprouted a new door. It wasn't there yesterday. Brass knob, painted black, covered in claw marks. On the wood scratched deep were the words, "Do not open unless you're ready to leave everything behind." I locked it. But every morning, it's open wider. I heard her voice outside. Delilah. She called me by name, begged to come in, said she remembered now. I opened the door. She looked the same, but her eyes were mirrors. She smiled. "Come back, Ethan. We miss you in the other place." I slammed the door. She still knocks. Every night at 3:03 a.m., the journal now offers a choice. Let him replace you fully, and you will never feel pain again. Resist, and you will remain broken, alone, and hunted. But yourself. The page pulses like a heartbeat. A pen appears on the table beside it every morning. I haven't chosen yet. But my hand trembles toward the first option more often now. Woke up with writing carved into my arms. One name, over and over, Nathaniel Crow. It's the name I heard in a dream. I researched it once, and found no record. Now the cabin whispers it. I tried writing my name to counteract it, but the pen only spells Crow. A final structure appears in the cabin. Not a door, not a hallway. A door frame hanging in midair. No walls around it. When I stand in it, everything around me freezes. The entity doesn't move. Time doesn't pass, only silence. I think this is the only place it can't follow. I built a bed there. Now it speaks through me, not just to me. Sometimes I wake mid-sentence, whispering things I don't understand. I am what watches between heartbeats. The self is a skin, easily shed. I cover all the mirrors. I wear gloves. I try not to see myself, because he's inside now. The ceiling collapses one night, not with weight, but with void. Above the roof is not sky. It's absence, a swirling gap that sucks light, sound, and memory. A tendril dropped down and touched my hand. Suddenly, I forgot my middle name and the sound of Delilah's laugh. I build a circle of old childhood items, toys, letters, my dad's watch. I sit in the center and scream my own name for an hour straight. The whispers pause. For the first time, he flinches. Maybe memory is my only weapon, maybe self is not yet lost. But then I hear the final whisper. You remembered, just in time to watch it end. I stand in the clearing behind the cabin. The fog is thick, swallowing trees whole. I write my name into the dirt. Ethan Walker. It vanishes. I write it again. Over and over. The earth won't keep it. Finally, I write the name that the whispers gave. Me. Nathaniel Crow. The fog parts. A path opens. The path leads to a spiraling field of dead flowers, all facing inward. At the center, a chair made of black wood. It's shaped like a throne. Sitting in it is me, but older. Grayer. Rotten. He looks up and says, I was you once, before I chose. Now I am peace. All you have to do is sit down, I ask. What happens if I don't? He grins. His teeth are not human. I find the gasoline tank behind. The cabin, matches in my hand. Heart racing. I soak the journal. The bed. The walls. Even myself. Maybe the only way to end this is to take everything down. But I hesitate. If I burn it all, will I burn myself? Or the version of me that replaced? Me! What if I'm not Ethan anymore? What if I'm already the copy? The journal flips open on its own. The pages write themselves. You have crossed the veil. The cycle now resets. Choose what you will forget, or be erased entirely. It shows me a list. Delilah's voice. My father's face. The word love, the color blue. My name. I scream and close the book. It whispers, you already chose. You just don't remember. The freestanding door frame now leaks black ink. It pools at the base like blood. A hand reaches through. It's mine, but it's not attached to me. The fingers tap rhythmically. Morse code. I decode it. It says, let me in. You are tired. I'll wear you gently. I try to radio for help, just static, until a voice answers. My voice. Ethan, this is the last message you will hear. You have until dawn. After that, you won't remember being human. He becomes you. You become background noise. Look outside, he's already waving. I look out the window. A figure stands among the trees, waving. I dig through a box of old belongings, find a photo of Delilah and me, smiling in the rain. The only proof that once I lived. Loved. I try to say her name aloud. Nothing comes out. Can't remember her voice. I can't remember my own laugh. Only static now. Always static. I meet him in the mirror one last time. He's identical, down to the scar under my left eye. But he's calm, serene, confident. He says, you've suffered. Enough. Let me take it from here, I ask. What happens to me? He shrugs. You fade. But I'll be kind. I'll let you watch. I close my eyes. When I open them, I'm still here. But I'm watching from behind his eyes. He lives normally now. He cooks, smiles, laughs. No fog, no whispers, no more journal. Neighbors wave to him, he waves back. But they never wave at me. They don't see me, trapped behind his smile. He locks the mirror now. I scream. No one hears me. There's no blood, no climax, no screams. Only a long silence. A perfect life. That isn't mine. He signs letters as Ethan Walker. He has Delilah's number. He says, "I'm okay now." But in the mirror, just for a second, he winks at me, and I feel myself fading. A knock on the cabin door. A girl. She says, "I saw the ad for the retreat. I need to get away." He smiles at her, invites her in. He shows her the guest room. He hands her a journal. She opens it. The first page reads, "Welcome, new one. Please write your name." Sometimes, when the wind blows just right, you can hear a whisper through the trees around the cabin. I was Ethan Walker, but no one remembers who that is anymore. They told me not to come. The Coast Guard captain, the university liaison, even the old man at the harbor cafe who watched me board the rusted ferry like I was rowing straight into hell. "The island's dead, miss," he'd muttered under his breath. "Best let the dead lie." But that's what they always say, isn't it? Dead towns, dead languages, dead myths. And yet I'm drawn to them all like a moth to flame. They don't understand. I'm not here for ghosts. I'm here for words. Elmswitch Island is unlike anywhere I've ever researched. It's off the books, mostly. Scrubbed from maps in the late 1800s after the population mysteriously disappeared. Not a war, not a famine, just silence. Reports say they stopped speaking. First, muteness, then isolation, then total vanishing, and then nothing. What's left behind? A ruined village, a stone lighthouse built by hands that disappeared, and walls carved with symbols in no known language, until now, because I've seen one of those symbols before. The air smells like old salt and moss. The fog doesn't drift here. It hangs, thick like damp wool. Even in daylight, it clings to my skin. The lighthouse looms above the harbor like a watchful eye. Not welcoming, not angry. Just watching. The boat left before my boots even touched the dock. I didn't blame the pilot. He wouldn't make eye contact with me, just handed me a radio with a low battery and said, "If it works, it works." The cottage I'm staying in used to be a fisherman's home. The roof's caved in on one side, but the fireplace works. My equipment is minimal. A journal, some paper, a field recorder, and 3 books on Proto-Indo-European roots. But it's the old documents from Professor Ellery's estate that I've come for. They were found on this island, sent back to the university decades ago. And inside them, one page, just one, held a symbol that should not exist. Not in this century. Not on this planet. Something strange happened last night. I heard something scratching near the floorboards. A mouse, maybe. Or wind. I didn't check. I just turned over and tried to sleep. But this morning, there were new markings near the fireplace. Thin gouges in the stone. Not random. Lines. Curves. A shape I've seen before. It matched the symbol from Ellery's notes. But I didn't carve. It's not just one symbol. It's a system. The lighthouse base has more. Carved faintly in the stone walls. Almost like graffiti. But when I rub chalk over them, they come alive. I can see the etymology, the repetition, the grammar. They're trying to say something. No. They are saying something. And I think I understand a few words. It's impossible, I know. But every night, I dream the same dream. A room with no walls, only echoes. Someone is speaking, not in English, but in the symbols. And somehow I know they're calling my name. This entry was written by someone else. Not typed, not copied, handwritten. In my notebook, using my pen, and in my handwriting. But I didn't write it. It says, "The mouth does not make the sound makes the mouth." I don't know what that means. I tried recording last night. Just Silence. But when I played it back this morning, there was a faint whisper underneath. Not a word. A tone. Almost like my breath slowed down and turned inside out. I want to leave, but I can't. I haven't translated the phrase on the lighthouse door. And worse, I think it's changing. Last night, I stood outside the lighthouse and listened. At first, just wind. But then I heard my voice. Not echoes. Actual words. Repeating back things I had said days ago. Language doesn't die. It mutates. You're not real. I am not afraid of forgotten things. It said them in my voice. But the tone wasn't right. It sounded deeper. As if the island was rehearsing how to be me. I opened the hatch to the base today. Underneath the lighthouse is a spiral staircase that descends into a stone corridor. The walls are covered in black moss and layered symbols. They glow faintly when touched. At the very bottom is a door, carved completely in the language, and this time I knew one word. It means mirror. I didn't open the door. Not yet. I woke up to find every page in my journal filled. From beginning to end, thousands of words in the ancient script. The ink is mine. The pressure of the pen. It's mine. But I never wrote any of it. I tried, reading one line aloud. Just one. My ears bled. Something has shifted. The sky doesn't look the same. The fog has faces now. Or maybe they've always been there, and I'm just finally seeing them. My reflection flickered this morning. I moved. She didn't. I will open the door tomorrow. If I don't write again, don't follow me here. Don't read the words. Some languages were never meant to be understood. Some voices never stopped speaking. After the door in the lighthouse basement remained stubbornly closed, I felt an unbearable urge to step away from that cold stone and into the wild thicket beyond. The village. The trees stood like sentinels, gnarled and ancient, their roots tangled like veins feeding the earth. The fog draped over the underbrush like a veil of white silk, muffling every sound but an insistent whisper I could barely catch. It called my name. It was barely audible, like the rustling of leaves or a breath caught on the wind. At first, I thought I imagined it, but then the whispers grew louder, closer, almost as if the forest was speaking to me. Claire. No one else was here. I tried to ignore it, but the voice was patient and persistent. I wandered deeper into the woods than I intended. The landscape seemed to shift around me. Paths I thought I remembered disappeared. Trees moved. Or maybe I did. A pale figure darted just beyond my sight, too fast to follow. When I called out, only the whispering answered. In a small clearing, I stumbled upon what looked like an ancient shrine, overgrown but unmistakably man-made. Symbols matching those in the lighthouse were carved on the moss-covered stones. I laid my hands on the cold rock, and a surge of images flooded my mind. Fleeting memories not my own. Rituals, gatherings, people chanting in the lost dialect. That night I dreamt again, this time standing among shadowy figures in the shrine, speaking in the old language. They looked at me with hollow eyes but smiled. When I woke, my journal pages were blank, wiped clean, as if they never existed. The boundary between dream and waking is blurring. I hear footsteps behind me on the forest floor, but see nothing. When I turn, the whispers have multiplied. They aren't just calling my name now. They're telling stories. Secrets of the island's downfall, warnings, pleas. But the words are fragmented. I fear what I don't understand. Today I met someone. Or something. A man, or a figure, standing silently at the edge of the woods. His clothes were old-fashioned, his eyes unnervingly deep. He spoke a single sentence in the ancient tongue and vanished before I could respond. Was he real? A ghost? Or a figment of the island's whispering? Despite the terror tightening my chest, I know I must keep going. The island's story isn't over, and whatever calls me isn't done yet. I'll return to the lighthouse tomorrow. The door must be opened, because some voices demand to be heard, even if they steal your mind in the process. Claire faces the door at the bottom of the lighthouse spiral staircase. She struggles to unlock its meaning and feels the island's presence growing stronger. Reality and madness blur as she edges closer to the truth, but opening the door might change everything forever. I've stared at the door for days. It's carved from heavy oak, blackened by time, and etched with the strange symbols I've spent weeks trying to decode. Each mark pulses faintly, like a heartbeat under my fingertips. I feel it before I touch it, the weight of centuries pressing down, the island watching, waiting. Every night I pore over my notes, trying to unravel the language's grammar, the meaning behind the carvings. The more I understand, the less sane I feel. The symbols speak of mirrors, echoes, and voices that trap souls. One phrase repeats obsessively. He who opens the door speaks forever in silence. What does that even mean? The air around the lighthouse thickens, almost suffocating. At times, I hear breathing, not my own. A slow, dragging inhale that seems to come from the stone itself. I wonder if the island is alive. If the door is a seal, what lies beyond? I catch my reflection in a shard of broken glass. Only it doesn't move in sync with me. There's a flicker, a shadow behind my eyes. Sometimes I see a second pair of eyes staring back. Is it me? Or the island wearing my face? My journal is full of cryptic notes, half-translated sentences, and drawings of the symbols. I'm certain the door hides more than a room. It hides a passage between worlds. I place my palm on the door. The symbols glow bright, burning my skin. A voice whispers just at the edge of hearing. Come in. Stay forever. Speak in silence. I turn the ancient handle slowly. The door creaks open, revealing blackness so deep it feels like falling into a void. I can't see anything, but the whispers flood into my mind. The voices of the island, the lost souls trapped within. I step inside. The room is impossible. No walls, no floor, just endless darkness. The air vibrates with a language that wraps around me, pulling me in. I try to scream, but only silence comes out. Then I see it. A flicker of movement at the edge of the void. Something is waiting. Since opening the door, the island feels different. The air pulses with a coldness that sinks into my bones. I catch glimpses of something just beyond my vision. Never quite clear, always shifting like smoke. At night, I feel its breath on my neck. The whispers are no longer soft. They scream in my mind, fragments of threats and promises. You belong here. Speak forever. I try to fight it, but the voice knows my darkest secrets, my fears, my regrets. The world bends. Hallways stretch into impossible lengths. Faces appear in mirrors, then vanish. My reflection sometimes smiles when I don't. Is this the entity? Or am I becoming it? I wake starving, but no food satisfies. It's like the island itself feeds on my soul, draining me slowly. I find strange marks on my skin, scratches that weren't there before. I try to reach out to the man from the woods again. Instead, I find a note in the ancient tongue. Beware the silence beyond the door. The warning chills me more than the entity's presence. Voices inside my head multiply. I lose hours, sometimes days. The entity's face flickers before me, a shadow with burning eyes. It wants me to surrender. I'm trapped. The island surrounds me like a cage. Every sound, every shadow is the presence watching, waiting. My journal is my only anchor to reality, but even that feels fragile. A final whisper. Join us. Forever. The presence grows stronger, pulling me closer to the void behind the door. I know my next step will change everything. My memories are like shards of broken glass, sharp, scattered, and bleeding. I can't tell which are mine and which belong to the island. Faces I don't recognize haunt my dreams. Names I've never heard echo in my mind. Am I losing myself, or was I never really here? The voices don't stop. They whisper lies and truths, twisting together until I can't tell the difference. Sometimes they speak as me, sometimes as the presence. I catch myself answering, agreeing, surrendering. I look in the mirror and see a stranger. Her eyes are hollow, but her smile is knowing, terrifying. I touch my face, but it feels like touching cold stone. Am I the reflection, or is the reflection me? The silence behind the door grows louder. It calls to me in dreams and waking hours alike. I try to run, but my feet stay rooted. The island doesn't let go. Time slips away like sand. I find myself back in the void behind the door, trapped between worlds. The presence waits, patient, hungry. I want to scream, but the silence swallows me whole. I can't trust my thoughts. My journal is filled with nonsense, yet somehow it feels like a map to escape, or to final submission. The line between reality and nightmare fades. A sudden clarity. The island's curse isn't just a story, it's a trap, and I'm caught. The presence isn't just watching, it's inside me. I feel it. The presence. Overwhelming and absolute. It moves like a shadow inside me, consuming what little is left of my sanity. My body trembles. My mind fractures. I know the final moment is coming. I return to the door, the threshold between this world and the darkness beyond. The whispers grow into roars. I try to fight, to scream, to escape. But the island's grip is iron. In the blackness behind the door, I glimpse it. A shape, shifting and impossible to define. Eyes that burn cold fire. A mouth that smiles without lips. It speaks, but no words reach my ears. Only a deep, soul-wrenching silence. My vision blurs. Reality crumbles like dust. I fall to my knees, swallowed by shadows. The last thing I feel is cold fingers closing around my heart. I am alone. Or maybe not. The island is quiet. Too quiet. I hear a faint whisper in the wind. Speak forever. No. One ever finds Claire Holloway. The island remains. The door waits. The presence listens, and the silence endures. I never expected this job to be anything special. Night watchman at an abandoned hospital wing. The pay was decent enough, and the solitude... Well, I wasn't shy about being alone. In fact, that was part of the appeal. I'm Henry Walker, by the way. I'm not one to talk much. People call me quiet, maybe a bit withdrawn. But I don't mind. I've always preferred the company of silence to the noise of crowds. This job seemed perfect for someone like me. The hospital itself was a relic of mistakes I learned quickly. The wing I was assigned to closed down 10 years ago, after a series of unexplained patient deaths. No one wanted to be near it anymore. They told me the stories were nonsense, just rumors fueled by fear and grief. But still, the air felt heavy the moment I stepped inside. The front doors groaned as I pushed my way in. The stale air smelled of disinfectant mixed with something far fouler, something like old rot. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting a sickly yellow glow on cracked tiles and peeling paint. The silence was thick, too thick. I made my way down the hall, my footsteps echoing in the emptiness. I checked the security cameras and locked every door behind me. It was strange, this place so long abandoned, yet some rooms still held the faintest signs of life. Discarded medical charts, rusted wheelchairs, and old bedpans left as if someone might return at any moment. I climbed the stairs to the second floor where the wing was officially closed off. The corridors were narrower here, darker. The walls bore water stains and graffiti scrawled in hurried hands. My job was simple: patrol the wing every hour, report any disturbances, and keep the place secure. On my first night, I noticed something immediately. I wasn't alone. I felt it in the back of my mind. A weight, a presence just beyond sight. I told myself it was nerves, the product of working alone in a place like this. But the feeling lingered. At one point, I thought I saw a shadow flicker at the end of a hallway. But when I turned, nothing was there. The hospital intercom hissed to life, crackling with static, and I swear I heard a whisper. Maybe a name, or just a sigh. I brushed it off. It had to be my imagination. During the day, I started poking around the old records room. It was a dusty archive of forgotten files, patient histories, staff logs, and incident reports. The names were faded, the stories fragmented. But one thing was clear. This wing had a history steeped in tragedy. Several patients died under mysterious circumstances. Some were said to have suffered terrifying hallucinations. Others simply vanished. The staff who worked here spoke in hushed tones about something in the basement. A place no one dared to enter. The basement. I hadn't even seen it yet. On the third night, the hospital seemed to wake. The lights flickered violently, plunging me into darkness for brief moments. Each time the lights returned, I caught glimpses of movement, shadows shifting in places they shouldn't be. I heard footsteps echo behind me, slow and deliberate, but when I spun around, the hall was empty. The intercom crackled again, this time clearer. A lullaby, faint and broken, drifting through the static. I wanted to leave, but something held me there. Curiosity, maybe, or fear of what would happen if I ran. The nights grew longer. Sleep refused to come. I began to talk aloud just to hear a voice, any voice. But sometimes I felt I was speaking into a void that answered back in murmurs I couldn't understand. The cold spots followed me, icy breaths on my neck when no one was near. Doors opened slowly by themselves. At times, I caught reflections in the cracked windows, reflections that weren't mine. And then, in my dreams, I heard a whisper. You shouldn't be here. The hospital no longer felt like a place I could keep my guard down. Every creak in the floor, every flicker of a light sent my pulse racing. I began counting the hours between patrols, willing the night to pass faster. But the signs were growing harder to ignore. That night, as I made my rounds, I noticed the basement door again, the one with the heavy steel lock. It had been shut, tight when I checked just an hour before, but now it stood slightly ajar, a dark crack yawning like a mouth waiting to swallow me whole. I stared at it, my breath catching in my throat. There was no way it could have opened on its own, and no one else was here. Yet, the door creaked softly, as if inviting me in, or warning me away. The hospital intercom was supposed to be dead, cut off years ago when the wing closed. But now, it crackled with life. Sometimes late into the shift, I'd hear voices. Not full sentences, just fragments. A name, a plea, a lullaby sung quietly and broken by static. Henry. One voice seemed to call. Leave. Another whispered. I found myself answering aloud, talking into the silence, hoping for a response. But only the hiss of static greeted me. The temperature dropped suddenly in certain rooms, icy chills that penetrated my jacket and settled deep in my bones. I wrapped my arms around myself, shivering. Shadows moved at the edge of my vision, always retreating when I tried to look directly. Once in the patient lounge, I found a wheelchair turned over, its wheels still slowly spinning as if pushed by invisible hands. The basement had become an obsession. I couldn't shake the sound of distant thumps, low moans, and scraping noises that echoed up through the floorboards. I tried to ignore them, telling myself it was the building settling, rats, or the wind. But then came the soft, irregular tapping, a slow, deliberate knocking from beneath the basement door. Sleep became impossible. The line between waking and dreaming blurred. I caught myself staring at empty hallways for minutes, waiting for something, anything, to appear. I started carrying a small flashlight everywhere, shining it down dark corridors, trembling as the beam caught shapes just beyond the edges of light. I began to wonder if the hospital itself was alive, breathing, watching, if the spirits of the lost patients still roamed, searching for release or revenge. Despite my mounting fear, I kept coming back each night. Something about this place called to me, whispered my name on the cold wind, pulling me deeper into its darkness. I was no longer just a watchman. I was a prisoner, and whatever waited in the shadows was patient. Henry's grip on reality starts to slip as the haunting presence grows stronger. It's hard to remember what's real anymore. The hospital no longer feels like a place I visit. It feels like a trap closing in around me. Every shadow seems to have eyes. Every silence hides a whisper just beneath hearing. Sleep has abandoned me. My dreams are filled with dark corridors and a voice I can't quite place, calling out in the dead of night. I catch myself checking the same hallways repeatedly, convinced something is following me. Sometimes, I swear I hear footsteps matching mine, but when I stop, they stop too. The staff radios in the control room buzz intermittently, static-filled but sometimes carrying voices that aren't mine. I'm certain I'm not losing my mind, but I can't deny something's breaking me. One night, I caught my reflection in a cracked window, except it didn't mirror my movements exactly. It smiled when I didn't. It blinked after I closed my eyes. I stumbled back, heart pounding. Was it a trick of the light? I don't think so. I've started avoiding mirrors altogether. Scratched into the peeling paint on a hallway wall, I found words written in what looked like dried blood. You're not welcome. Another night, I woke to find my name written repeatedly, on fogged glass, written by invisible fingers. I'm being watched, and I'm not alone. Sometimes I hear conversations, fragments of laughter, screams, cries for help. They come from nowhere and everywhere at once. I see fleeting figures in my peripheral vision, faces contorted in pain or rage, vanishing when I try to confront them. Each day I feel more drained, more distant from myself. The hospital's presence is seeping into my mind. Last night I found myself standing in the basement doorframe, unable to move. The knocking from below was urgent, desperate. A voice, low and guttural, whispered, "Come down." I wanted to run, but my feet wouldn't. Move. This place is consuming me. I don't know how much longer I can fight it. Henry spirals deeper into madness as the entity tightens its grip. Reality blurs, and the line between life and death becomes terrifyingly thin. The hospital is no longer just a building. It's A living nightmare that breathes down my neck every second I'm inside. Every night I hear the relentless tapping from the basement door growing louder, like a heartbeat pounding beneath the floor. Sleep has become a cruel joke. When I close my eyes, I'm dragged into horrific visions. Twisted hallways flooding with shadows, faceless figures reaching out for me with cold, clammy hands. I'm losing track of time. Days and nights blend into one long, endless terror. I've never seen it fully, and maybe that's what terrifies me most. Instead, I feel its presence everywhere. Objects move on their own. Files scatter off desks, lights flicker violently, and an old wheelchair starts rolling through hallways without anyone pushing it. The air feels heavy, charged with something dark and malevolent. I catch glimpses of shapes, tall, thin, with unnatural movements, darting just beyond my vision, always disappearing when I turn. Once, in the corner of a room, I saw a pair of glowing eyes watching me. I froze. The eyes blinked slowly, and then vanished. I start to question my own memories. Sometimes I'm convinced I've seen people I know wandering these halls. Old doctors, nurses who died years ago. But when I call out, they fade. Like ghosts, I hear conversations in empty rooms, arguments, cries for mercy, then silence. The hospital seems to pulse with life, a sinister heartbeat that syncs with my own racing pulse. I can no longer tell if the sounds I hear are real or imagined. The voices seem to speak directly to me, calling my name, taunting me. The isolation is suffocating. I'm cut off from the outside world. No phone signal, no visitors, no escape. I tried to leave once, but the hospital's corridors twisted, turning into a maze I couldn't navigate. It's like the building itself is alive, imprisoning me in this waking nightmare. I scribble notes, desperate to keep track of what's happening. But the pages tear themselves, words vanish or rewrite overnight. The knocking beneath the basement door is no longer just a sound. It's a call, a summons. I know whatever waits down there is the source of all this terror. I'm terrified to answer, but I feel drawn to it, as if it holds some horrible truth I need to face. I wake up screaming, drenched in sweat, to find my own face staring back at me from broken glass. I question my sanity. Am I going mad? Or is something else breaking me down? I can't trust my senses anymore. I don't know if the shadows creeping closer are real, or just manifestations of my unraveling mind. Tonight, I found a message scratched deep into the basement door, in what looked like fresh blood. You belong to us now. The words chilled me to my core. I feel the entity's grip tightening around my soul, pulling me closer to a darkness I cannot escape. I'm left standing on the edge, between this world and whatever lies beyond. I know the final confrontation is coming. I can feel it in my bones. But will I survive it? Or will I become just another lost soul trapped within these walls? The hospital is suffocating. Every hallway seems to close in tighter around me, shadows twisting and writhing in the corners of my vision. I keep hearing that voice, low, guttural, whispering just beyond comprehension. It calls my name, promising things I don't want, but feel powerless to refuse. The basement door's bloodied message haunts me. You belong to us now. The words pulse with an awful truth I'm terrified to face. Objects in the hospital begin to move violently on their own. Ceiling lights slam down, cabinets fling open, and that old wheelchair crashes into walls with furious speed. The air grows thick with an oppressive presence, a darkness that feels almost tangible, like a physical weight pressing down on my chest. I feel cold hands brush against my skin, hear heavy breathing right behind me. Yet whenever I whirl around, I'm met with empty air. That knocking is relentless now, an urgent summons that no longer lets me rest. With trembling hands, I approach the basement door. The handle is icy cold, but it moves easily when I grip it. The darkness behind the door seems bottomless, swallowing all light. Something inside calls to me. A promise or a threat. I don't know which. I don't see the entity fully. But I sense it's close. Too close. Shadows ripple across the walls like living things. A distorted silhouette with elongated limbs and glowing eyes briefly appears at the edge of the basement stairwell before vanishing into the darkness. The entity's presence overwhelms me, a mix of fear, sadness, and rage that crashes like a wave against my mind. Panic surges through me, but I force myself to stay calm. I remember the old legends whispered by hospital staff before the wing closed. Tales of restless spirits trapped by violence and betrayal. I grasp an old crucifix left in the chapel and hold it like a lifeline, praying it offers some protection. The entity lashes out, shadows twisting into clawed hands, reaching to drag me into the abyss. I scream, fighting back with all my strength, pushing through the oppressive darkness. As I struggle, the hospital itself seems to fight alongside me, the walls shaking, lights flickering violently. I feel my sanity slipping, the line between reality and nightmare breaking down. A voice, distant but clear, whispers, "You cannot run, you cannot hide." I realize the fight is not just for my life, but for my very soul. In a sudden flash, a memory surfaces, a patient's name, a forgotten story of redemption and peace. Could this be the key? Could remembering the past be the way to break the entity's hold? With renewed determination, I push toward the basement steps, ready to face whatever horrors lie beneath. As I descend into the darkness, the air thickens and the temperature plummets. The basement is colder than anything I've ever felt, like the breath of death itself. Shadows dance along the damp walls, twisting into grotesque shapes that mock sanity. I try to steady my breathing as I step further into the darkness, guided by that sinister whisper that promises both revelation and doom. Out of the blackness emerges a figure, tall and terrifying, but never fully revealed. Its eyes burn with an otherworldly light, its limbs contorting in unnatural ways. It reaches for me, but I don't see a face, only a void, an emptiness that chills me to the core. The entity's presence floods my mind with visions of despair and endless torment. I try to resist, screaming for help no one can hear. Memories of happier times flash before me, a reminder of who I was, before this nightmare. In that moment, I find a flicker of strength. I shout the entity's name, if it even has one, and step back, breaking the creature's hold for a fleeting moment. The struggle feels endless, fought in shadows and screams. I don't know if I win or lose, only that the entity fades just enough to let me escape. I crawl back up the basement stairs, gasping for breath, covered in sweat, and something else I don't want to think about. Stumble into the empty hospital corridors, the oppressive darkness lifting slightly. But the silence feels wrong, unnatural. The hospital is quiet, too quiet. As I make my way toward the exit, I catch a glimpse of my reflection in a broken window, but it's not my face staring back, it's the entity's. I freeze. A cold, sickening realization dawns. The darkness didn't leave me. It's inside me now. I run outside, desperate to escape the hospital and its curse, but even as the sun rises, the shadows cling to me. The last line echoes in my mind. Welcome home, Henry. And I know the nightmare has only just begun. The damp chill of the early morning wraps around me like a shroud as I stare up at the crumbling mansion that stands half-forgotten on the edge of Valburga. They say it belonged to some distant cousin of Count Dracula himself. Tourists eat up stories like that. Morbid, thrilling, a glimpse into the supernatural. Martin and I came up with the perfect scam. A fake guided tour with ghost stories, creaky floors, and staged scares. Easy money for a couple of desperate guys with no scruples. Can already see the faces of the tourists. Wide-eyed, expectant, hungry for something dark and dangerous. And I'll give them what they want, just not the truth. Walking up the cracked stone steps, I feel a prickling unease crawl along my skin. The mansion's shadow stretches out like a beast ready to pounce. Windows stare blankly like empty sockets. The wooden door hangs slightly ajar, creaking with the wind. Inside, dust and rot choke the air. Paint peels from walls, and the floorboards groan beneath every step. I run my hand along the faded wallpaper, tracing ancient patterns that seem to shift when I'm not looking. Martin jokes about the place being haunted. I laugh, but deep down, I'm not so sure. There's something here. Something watching. The first group arrives midday. Tourists bundled in jackets, clutching cameras and flashlights. I play the perfect host, spinning tales of bloodlines and curses. Dracula's shadow lurking just out of sight. We start with the grand hall. Its ceiling so high it swallows our voices, and the air thickens, almost choking. A sudden flicker of the lights, the faint sound of footsteps where no one walks. I catch a shadow moving just beyond the cracked doorway. Probably the wind, I say quickly, forcing a smile. No one else seems to notice. As we move through the mansion, strange things happen. A door slams shut behind us. Candles sputter out. Whispers curl just beyond hearing. The tourists grow nervous, eyes darting. Martin's smile fades. I tell myself it's all part of the act, but the pit in my stomach grows heavier. One visitor claims to have seen a figure, a tall man in old-fashioned clothes, standing silently in the hallway. I check the room. Empty. But when I turn back, there's that fleeting glimpse again, just at the edge of my vision. Later, when the tourists leave, Martin and I sit in the fading light, nursing cheap beer. He wants to pull the plug on the scam. This place feels wrong, he says. We're playing with fire. I tell him it's just nerves and coincidence. But the truth is, I've felt it too. The weight of history, the cold stare of unseen eyes. I sneak back inside alone, flashlight cutting through the dark. The mansion whispers secrets, and I find an old, dust-covered diary hidden beneath a loose floorboard. The writing is cryptic but chilling. Tales of blood, betrayal, and a curse that never dies. That night, I lie awake, the mansion's shadows seeping into my dreams. I hear soft footsteps outside my window, see fleeting shapes in the corner of my eye. I tell myself to sleep, to rest. But something has awoken in Valburga. Something that's been waiting, and it's watching me. The morning. Light does nothing to clear the fog swirling in my mind. I can't stop thinking about that diary. The faded pages full of cryptic notes and chilling tales about the mansion's past. I spend hours reading it, piecing together the story of the mansion's original owner. One Jonathan Valburga, said to be the cousin of Count Dracula. The diary hints at rituals, strange disappearances, and an ancient curse tied to the family bloodline. A knot tightens in my stomach. Was our scam just scratching the surface of something far darker? Martin's face grows more drawn by the day. His usual bravado is replaced by quiet glances toward the mansion's windows, and long silences when he thinks I'm not watching. You don't believe this stuff, do you? I ask, trying to sound confident. He shakes his head. I want to. But last night, I heard whispering outside my window. And there's something about the house. It feels alive. I want to dismiss him, but the unease gnaws at me too. We decide to explore the mansion more thoroughly, searching for clues that could add authenticity to our scam. But instead of finding evidence of marketing gold, we uncover strange symbols etched into the woodwork and walls, ancient markings I can't decipher. The shadows seem to shift as we walk past, and the temperature drops so suddenly I shiver despite my jacket. A soft tapping echoes through the empty halls, like fingers drumming on a wall, yet there's no one there. That afternoon, during a small private tour, the tourists gasp in terror as a figure appears in the upper hallway. Tall, pale, and wearing outdated clothing, the figure watches silently before vanishing. I rush to the spot, empty. Did you see him? I ask Martin, heart pounding. He nods slowly. We need to get out of here. But the tourists want more. The excitement in their eyes makes me hesitate. This could be good for business. Night falls, and I'm alone in the mansion. The walls seem to breathe. Whispered voices thread through the silence, sometimes calling my name. I find myself doubting what's real and what isn't. Footsteps behind me, flickers of movement, cold breath on my neck. None appear when I turn. Martin tries to reach me on the phone but gets no answer. I'm starting to think he's right. We've unleashed something we don't understand. At dawn, I find a message scrawled on the dusty mirror in the guest room. Leave before the curse takes you. My hands tremble. This isn't a prank. This is a warning. The mansion is alive, watching, and hungry. I want to run, but the scam, and maybe my own curiosity, holds me in place. The mansion no longer feels like a place I can leave. Its halls twist in ways that don't make sense. Doors lead to rooms I don't remember, and the walls seem to close in around me. I try to tell Martin it's just exhaustion, but even I'm not sure anymore. My reflection in the cracked mirrors seems distorted, almost alive, watching me. Sleep offers no refuge. Nightmares drag me back into the mansion's dark past. Visions of Jonathan Valberga performing unholy rites, blood-soaked floors, whispered curses. But the worst part? These dreams start bleeding into reality. I hear the same chanting in the halls during the day. Shadows move just beyond sight. And then, the nightmares start speaking to me, calling me by name. One morning, I wake up alone. Martin is gone. No note, no call. Just silence. Panic claws at me as I search the mansion, every creak and whisper mocking me. Did the curse take him? Did he run? I find his jacket in the old cellar, torn and soaked with something dark. The mysterious figure returns, this time closer, more defined. A man with hollow eyes and a twisted smile, whispering secrets I dare not understand. It doesn't show its full form, but hints at horrors beyond comprehension. I feel its gaze like a cold blade slicing through me. My grip on reality slips. I can't tell if I'm awake or dreaming. I see Martin's face in every shadow, hear his voice calling for help. Paranoia consumes me. The mansion toys with my mind, feeding on my fear. Every step I take feels like a step deeper into madness. The diary reveals a terrible choice: escape and lose everything, or embrace the curse and become part of the mansion's eternal nightmare. I stand at the threshold of the mansion's grand hall, feeling the cold embrace of the curse wrap around me. Brian is trapped between his fading sanity and the mansion's malevolent will. The story pivots toward his struggle to resist or succumb to the ancient evil that dwells within. Each day blurs into the next in a nightmare loop. The mansion no longer feels like just a building. It's a living entity controlling time and space. Hallways elongate, rooms change shape, and my reflection fractures into grotesque versions of myself. I barely recognize the man staring back in the mirror. A hollow shell, haunted and broken. The diary becomes my only anchor. It tells of Valburga's, packed with a shadowy entity, a curse born of blood and betrayal. I begin to experience visions, not just memories, but lived experiences of Jonathan himself. I see his descent into darkness, the sacrifices he made, the horrors he unleashed. These visions are vivid, blurring the line between past and present. The entity's voice grows louder in my mind, soft whispers evolving into screams. It calls me by name, promising power and release from my torment if I join it. The mansion pulses with energy, responding to the entity's will. Shadows twist into horrific shapes, and the temperature plunges. Objects move on their own. Doors slam without wind. I hear footsteps pacing behind me but find no one. At night, the entity's presence invades my dreams, showing me a future where I become a prisoner trapped forever, chained to the mansion's dark will. Martin's absence haunts me. Was he consumed? Or did he escape, leaving me behind? I begin to doubt my own senses. Am I the cause of the curse? Am I already lost? Every creak and whisper becomes a threat. The mansion feeds on my terror, growing stronger. One night, a chilling event breaks me. An unseen force drags me across the floor. My screams echo through the halls, but no one comes. I realize the entity is no longer content to watch. It wants to claim me, body and soul. Brian's mind and body weaken as the curse's grip tightens. The story teeters between his fading hope and the overwhelming power of the ancient evil. The mansion's curse reveals its true horror: eternal imprisonment, with no escape. Despite the overwhelming darkness, a spark of determination ignites within me. I refuse to become another lost soul swallowed by the mansion. I scour the diary for clues, rituals, symbols, anything that could weaken the entity's hold. Unexpectedly, I find references to others who resisted the curse, former victims whose spirits linger, trapped but willing to help. I hear faint voices guiding me through the mansion's maze, revealing secret passages and hidden rooms. Armed with ancient texts and trembling resolve, I prepare to perform a ritual to sever the curse's hold. The mansion fights back, walls shift, shadows attack, and the temperature plummets to freezing. The entity manifests more aggressively, tormenting me with illusions of Martin's fate and visions of eternal torment. It whispers promises of power if I surrender, taunts me with my fears and failures. The ritual is interrupted by a violent surge of supernatural energy. I'm thrown across the room, my vision blurs, and I feel my soul being ripped apart. But I fight, using every ounce of willpower to hold on. In a moment of clarity, the entity's hold weakens. The mansion trembles. I glimpse a way out, an exit buried beneath layers of darkness and fear. But escaping means leaving Martin behind, and the haunting thought of his fate chills me to the bone. I steel myself for the final battle within the mansion's darkest chamber, a room drenched in shadows and soaked with the echoes of past horrors. The air is thick, almost suffocating, as the entity's presence looms stronger than ever. The entity reveals fragments of its form, twisted, shifting shapes, barely human, but more terrifying for what it hides. It speaks directly to me, its voice a cold whisper, promising oblivion if I don't yield. My mind fractures under the entity's relentless assault. Memories blur, reality distorts, and I question my own existence. I fight desperately, wielding the ancient ritual as both shield and weapon, but the entity's power feels endless. In a final moment of horror, the entity closes in, its full form, never shown, only glimpsed in distorted reflections and fleeting shadows. The mansion itself seems to pulse with malevolent life, as if feeding on my fear. A hidden door bursts open, revealing a narrow path to freedom. I'm torn. Escape means leaving the mansion's dark secrets and Martin's fate behind, but staying means eternal damnation. I run, the entity's whispers chasing me down the halls, fading but never gone. Outside, the dawn breaks, cold and gray. I'm free, but haunted. The mansion's curse lingers in my mind, an unshakable shadow. Martin is gone. The entity is not destroyed, and I know this nightmare is far from over. It was supposed to be an unforgettable Halloween night. For Emma, it was a chance to forget the stress of her university life and enjoy a fun, carefree evening with her closest friends. She'd heard rumors of an extreme haunted house, one that pushed the boundaries of what was possible in terms of fear. Located far from the city, it was shrouded in mystery, and Emma couldn't resist the idea of seeing it for herself. She, along with her boyfriend Luke, her best friend Sophie, Sophie's boyfriend Jack, and their close friend Daniel, piled into a car late that evening, heading toward the unknown. The wind howled through the trees, casting an eerie shadow over the winding road as they drove further from civilization. I still think we're going to regret this, Sophie laughed nervously, her voice shaky but teasing as she glanced at Emma. Sophie's usually confident demeanor seemed to waver under the weight of the night. "Oh, come on, it'll be fine. It's just a haunted house," Emma reassured her, though even she couldn't shake the tension creeping along her spine. The town they'd been told about was quiet, eerily so. Emma had heard stories about it before, but this wasn't the place for folklore. This was a professional haunted house, rumored to have actors that would make your worst nightmares come to life. Luke reached for her hand, offering a comforting smile. "Just think of it as an adventure. We'll have a blast, I promise." They approached the location. Emma noticed how unsettling the area was. A narrow path led through trees, the thick branches almost swallowing the road. The house loomed in the distance, obscured by darkness, its towering silhouette stark against the night sky. "This is it," Daniel said, his voice filled with awe and a hint of dread. The others could barely make out the shape of the building. Now, it was old, seemingly abandoned. A sharp chill settled in Emma's bones. The entrance was framed by a pair of ominous wrought iron gates, cracked and rusted. A sign hanging above them read, "Fear's Last Haven," and Emma could barely make out the words before the gate creaked open. The air felt wrong, like they were crossing into another world. They were led inside by masked staff who welcomed them with exaggerated smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. Each person in the group was given a wristband, as if part of some twisted initiation. The haunted house was so much larger inside than they expected, with rooms that twisted and turned, almost as if the house itself had a mind of its own. They walked through the darkened halls. Strange sounds echoed through the building, whispers that felt too close, footsteps that didn't match their own. But it was all part of the act, they thought. The group laughed uneasily as they were guided deeper into the house, following the trail of flickering lanterns that seemed to dance on the walls. "This is amazing," Luke said, his voice hushed with excitement. But Emma couldn't ignore the strange feeling that crept over her. It wasn't the playful fear of a typical haunted house attraction. It was something darker, something real. Suddenly the group was separated. Sophie was dragged into a different room by a masked figure who grinned as they passed by, their movements unnervingly slow. The others tried to call out, but the sounds of the haunted house filled the air, muffling their voices. Emma's heart raced as she tried to call out to Sophie. "Sophie?" Her voice trembled, but no response came. She grabbed Luke's hand, clutching it tightly as they hurried down the hallway, desperate to catch up. They were lost. The once friendly whispers now seemed to mock them, echoing from the walls as they ventured deeper into the darkness. A door ahead of them creaked open slowly, and from within came a terrible, agonizing scream. It wasn't a scream for show. It was real. "Did you hear that?" Daniel's voice was barely a whisper, but the fear in it was unmistakable. "I think we should get out of here," Jack said, his face pale, eyes wide with panic. But before they could react, the door to the room ahead burst open, and a figure, tall and dark, wearing a blood-streaked mask, lunged at them. The others screamed, backing away in horror, but the masked figure was too fast. It grabbed Sophie, who had reappeared in the doorway, and in one swift motion dragged her into the shadows. "No!" Emma screamed, her voice cracking. She tried to rush forward, but Luke held her back, his face twisted in fear. "Get back!" Luke shouted, pulling her away from the door. "We need to leave now!" But the path was blocked. There was no way out. With Sophie gone and their escape route cut off, panic spread through the group. The house, once just a dark maze, now felt like a living, breathing thing, its walls closing in on them. Emma tried to keep calm, but every part of her screamed that they were no longer in control. The masks of the actors weren't fake anymore. They were faces of terror, of something far darker than a mere attraction. "Stay close," Luke said, his voice filled with tension. "We need to stick together." But that was easier said than done. The corridors twisted unnaturally, taking them in circles. Every corner they turned seemed to lead them deeper into the house, with more grotesque figures appearing to taunt and chase them. Jack stumbled into a room with mirrors that distorted their reflections, and for a terrifying moment Emma thought she saw the figure of Sophie standing behind her, only for it to vanish as quickly as it had appeared. Their group was starting to fracture. Daniel, panicked and desperate, rushed toward a door, only for it to slam shut in his face. Behind it, Emma could hear the sounds of someone whispering, beckoning him towards something terrible. But before she could react, the house came alive. With sounds, screams from behind the walls, laughter that wasn't human. The lights flickered and went out. Darkness pressed in from every side. They had walked into a nightmare, and there was no waking up. The stifling darkness closed in on them as the group huddled together. Emma's breathing was shallow, heart hammering in her chest. The house felt alive, its walls pulsating as if they were caught in the belly of a monstrous beast. Their frantic search for an exit only deepened the sense of claustrophobia, and the sounds of their own footsteps echoed unnaturally loud down the narrow corridors. "Where are we?" Sophie's voice quivered, breaking the silence. She had reappeared, much to Emma's relief. But she looked different. Her face pale, her eyes wide and filled with something Emma couldn't quite place. There was a strange, distant look to her, as if she had just woken from a trance. "We're trapped," Luke said, his voice tinged with fear. His hand clenched tightly around Emma's, as if afraid that letting go would make her disappear again. "We need to find a way out now," Daniel said, his voice nearly a whisper. "There's something wrong here, something off." The walls of the house seemed to close in tighter with each passing moment, the eerie sounds growing louder. A soft, scraping noise echoed from one of the rooms, sending a chill down their spines. They turned toward it, the group freezing as the air turned colder, their breath visible in front of them. "I don't want to know what that is," Jack muttered, his voice cracking with dread. But the house didn't give them a choice. The scraping. Noise grew louder, closer, and then a door in the corner creaked open. Emma's heart stopped in her chest when she saw what lay beyond. A long, dark corridor stretched out before them, but someone, was standing at the end of it. The figure was cloaked in black, its back to them, unmoving. There was something about the figure, an unsettling stillness that felt unnatural, like it didn't belong in this world. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out again. The figure moved, but it wasn't just walking, it was gliding toward them. Each step soundless, but somehow filled with dreadful weight. A voice, soft and low, drifted through the air like an ancient chant. "You shouldn't have come here," it whispered. The group backed away, but the figure's movements were unnatural, fluid, and impossibly fast. A cold chill swept through the air, and Emma felt a wave of nausea rise in her throat. This wasn't part of the attraction. This wasn't a performance. This was real. The figure stopped just short of them, and with a sudden movement, it reached up to its face and pulled the mask off. But what was beneath wasn't human. The mask fell to the ground with a heavy thud, revealing a distorted, rotting visage, its skin hanging in tatters, with eyes that glowed an unnatural, sickly yellow. The figure's mouth stretched open in a grotesque grin, exposing jagged teeth that gleamed in the darkness. "No one leaves," it rasped, its voice like the sound of nails scraping across glass. The group froze, horror gripping them. They were no longer in a haunted house. They were trapped in something far worse. Emma felt her legs weaken beneath her, her mind screaming at her to run, but her body wouldn't obey. The thing before them took another step forward, its face twisted in an unholy mockery of a smile. "You will be part of the show. Forever," it hissed. With that, it lunged toward them. Sophie screamed, but the creature was too fast. It grabbed her by the wrist, dragging her across the floor. Emma's pulse pounded in her ears as she screamed her friend's name. Luke tried to reach out to stop the creature, but it was no use. The force was too great. "No! Let her go!" Luke shouted, but his voice was drowned out by the creature's horrific laughter. The group ran. Panic fueled their every step, but the house seemed to stretch endlessly before them, each hallway twisting into another. Their breaths came in ragged gasps, but the house didn't care. It was alive, feeding on their terror. "We can't outrun this!" Daniel shouted, his voice desperate as they skidded around another corner. Think! Emma cried, trying to keep her wits about her. They had to find a way out, some way out, but it was clear now. The house didn't want them to leave. It was a trap, a living nightmare that fed on fear and pain. "Wait!" Jack shouted, his eyes wide with realization. "I saw something back there. A door, hidden behind the wall. It could be an exit." They sprinted back, but as they neared the spot where Jack had seen the door, it disappeared, vanishing into thin air. The walls closed in around them, the house laughing at their desperation. "This place, it's not just haunted," Sophie muttered, her eyes wide with terror. "It's alive." And then the lights went out again. The darkness was complete. There was no light, no way to see what was happening around them. Emma could feel the walls closing in, suffocating her. The oppressive silence was broken only by the sound of ragged breathing and the occasional scratch against the walls. Suddenly, the silence was shattered by a loud bang. The walls around them shook, and Emma felt the ground beneath her tremble. It was as if the house was alive, moving with an insatiable hunger. Something whispered her name. "Emma." She turned, heart racing. Was it Luke, Sophie, or was it something worse? The voice came again, louder now, filled with malice. "You'll never leave. You'll never leave this place." Before Emma could react, the world around her went completely dark. The house was no longer just a place. It was a sentient being. Emma could feel its eyes on her, watching her every move, making sure she knew she was not alone. There was a suffocating sense of dread pressing in on her from all sides, as if the walls themselves could reach out and choke her. the dark corridor they found themselves in stretched on forever. No matter how far they walked, they never seemed to get closer to the exit. The only sound that could be heard was the soft scraping of their footsteps, muffled by the oppressive air around them. "We have to find Sophie," Luke said, his voice hoarse, panic creeping in. Emma nodded, but her eyes kept darting around, searching for any sign of the horrible creature that had dragged Sophie away. The fear of never seeing her again gnawed at her insides. The house groaned, as if it were alive and unhappy with their presence. There was something alive about it, something more sinister than just a haunted house. She could feel it. Feel the evil in the very air they breathed. "We'll find her," Emma said, but even she wasn't sure if she believed it anymore. Suddenly, the lights flickered. The oppressive darkness that had been growing heavier seemed to press closer, like an entity that was closing in on them. "Where are we?" Daniel whispered, barely able to control his voice. The floor beneath them seemed to shift, and the walls stretched out in unnatural ways, twisting and contorting. Emma's stomach churned as she felt the room grow smaller, the air thicker. "You have to leave," a voice suddenly whispered in her ear, but when she turned to look, there was no one there. The voice echoed in her mind, cold and harsh. "Leave, now, before it's too late." The others stopped in their tracks. They could hear it too now. The faint whisper of a voice that wasn't quite human. The walls seemed to hum with a low vibration, like the house itself was trying to communicate. A loud bang echoed from the other end of the corridor. The group turned toward it, instinctively moving forward. But before they could reach the source, the floor suddenly gave way beneath them, sending them tumbling down into the darkness. When Emma awoke, her head was pounding, and her vision was blurry. She groaned and sat up, taking in her surroundings. She was in a room that didn't seem to belong to the house. It was ancient, covered in dust, with old furniture that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. "Where are we?" Jack asked, his voice barely audible as he helped Daniel to his feet. "This doesn't feel like the rest of the house," Daniel muttered, looking around uneasily. "It feels different." The room had an oppressive energy to it, and the walls seemed to pulse with a faint rhythmic beat, as though the house were breathing. Suddenly a faint whisper floated through the air, causing Emma to freeze. "Don't touch the walls," said, as if it were a warning. Emma spun around, but there was no one there. Just the same old decaying walls of the room. "What was that?" Luke's voice shook as he moved closer to Emma, his face pale. "I don't know," she whispered back. But deep down, she knew. She knew that they were in the heart of the house now, in a place that had been forgotten by time, and perhaps even by the people who had built this place. They weren't just trapped, they were inside something ancient and terrifying. Emma cautiously moved forward, her eyes scanning the room for any sign of danger. The floor creaked beneath her feet, and she jumped at the sound. "Wait," Jack said, his voice barely above a whisper. He was standing by a small, dusty door in the corner of the room. This could be the way out. Without waiting for anyone to respond, he pushed the door open, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into the bowels of the house. "What do you think?" Daniel asked, his voice tight with fear. "I don't know if we have a choice," Emma replied, her voice trembling. "Let's go." The group made their way down the dark stairs, the air growing colder with every step. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of their footsteps. The walls seemed to close in as they descended, the oppressive feeling growing stronger. They reached the bottom of the stairs, and Emma could feel the floor beneath her shift. They were no longer standing on solid ground. It was as if they had entered a different realm entirely. The room before them was vast, but the air felt suffocating. The walls were lined with ancient symbols, and the floor was covered in dust that had clearly been untouched for centuries. In the center of the room, an altar stood. A strange, glowing symbol was etched into the stone, surrounded by candles that flickered with an eerie light. Emma's breath caught in her throat as she saw what was standing beside the altar. It was Sophie, but she wasn't the same. Her eyes were wide and unblinking, her body stiff. Her skin was pale, and she looked like a lifeless puppet frozen in time. "No," Emma whispered, but her voice barely made a sound. Sophie's head turned slowly, and Emma's heart skipped a beat when she saw the dark, hollow pits where her eyes should have been. "You should never have come here." Sophie's voice came out in a guttural rasp. "Now you will all join us. Forever." Emma stumbled backward, her pulse racing. The others froze, fear gripping them like iron chains. This was no longer a haunted house. They were in the heart of something far darker, something that fed on the souls of the living. The altar began to pulse, and Emma felt her body grow heavier, as though the very air was being drained from her lungs. The candles flickered, casting long shadows across the room. The walls seemed to close in, and the ground beneath them shook violently. The house was alive, and it wanted them. Before they could react, the room exploded in an ear-splitting scream. The walls cracked open, revealing something dark, writhing beneath the floor. The symbols on the walls began to glow, pulsing with an unnatural light. "It's here," Daniel gasped, his voice full of dread. The dark shape beneath the floor began to rise, pulling itself from the depths of the earth. It was massive, its shape shifting and contorting like a living nightmare. The house seemed to scream as the figure reached its full height, and the very air around them seemed to crackle with dark energy. The group turned and fled, but the darkness followed them faster than they could run. Emma's breath came in ragged gasps as she stumbled through the endless corridors of the house, the others close behind her. The darkness around them seemed to stretch and bend, warping the walls into grotesque shapes that flickered and disappeared the moment they looked away. It felt as if the very structure of the house was alive, watching them, waiting for the right moment to strike. They hadn't even begun to process what they'd seen in the ritual room when the house started to shift again, its walls closing in as if they were being funneled toward something. Each corner they turned led to another dead end, another room that was only a mirror of the one they had just escaped. There was no way out, no escape from the twisted labyrinth that had trapped them inside. "This can't be real," Luke whispered, his voice full of disbelief. "This can't be happening." But it was happening. The house was real, and it was feeding on their fear, on their desperation. As Emma walked, the weight of the house pressed down on her chest, making it difficult to breathe. She felt like she was suffocating, not from lack of air, but from the sheer malevolence that surrounded them. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was closing in on them, hunting them. "It's too late to run," Daniel said quietly, his face pale with fear. "We have to face it." Emma glanced at him, nodding grimly. They had come this far. There was no turning back now. "I think I know how to stop it," Emma said, her voice shaking but resolute. "But we need to find the heart of the house. We need to destroy it." "The heart?" Luke repeated, his brow furrowing. "You mean—" "I don't know how, but there's something here, something ancient. If we destroy the source, maybe we can stop this." The group continued to move through the house, searching for the heart, the source of the malevolent force. They could feel the air growing colder, the house becoming more oppressive with each step. It felt as though the very walls were pushing them toward something, toward a confrontation they couldn't avoid. They finally stumbled upon an old, hidden door. Behind it was a long staircase, leading down into the bowels of the house. This was no ordinary cellar. It was a place forgotten by time, untouched for centuries. The air down here was thick with dust, but it felt ancient. The walls were covered in dark symbols, symbols that Emma had seen before in the room where Sophie had been. "Is this the heart?" Daniel asked, his voice full of awe and dread. Emma didn't respond, too focused on the strange carvings on the walls. They were written in an old language, one she couldn't read, but she could feel the power in them. The symbols pulsed with an unnatural rhythm, like the beat of a dying heart. "What is this place?" Luke asked, his voice low. "This is where it all began," Emma said, her eyes scanning the symbols. "The house wasn't always like this. It was built for a purpose, a ritual, an offering to something older and darker than anything we can imagine." Jack's face went pale. "You mean the house was made to summon this thing?" Emma nodded, her heart heavy. "Yes, the house was built as a vessel to trap the entity inside. But now, the entity is in control, and it's hungry." As they ventured further into the dark depths of the house, Emma's mind began to race. She felt like she was unraveling the truth of the house, the terrible truth that had been hidden for centuries. The entity wasn't just a ghost, a vengeful spirit. It was something much older, something that had been waiting for the right moment to return to the world of the living. She reached out and touched the wall, her fingers brushing against the cold stone. As soon as she did, a shock of electricity jolted through her, and she pulled her hand back with a sharp gasp. The walls shuddered, and the ground beneath them trembled. The entity was awakening. "We need to get out of here," Luke said, his voice trembling with fear. "This place is alive." Suddenly, the air in the basement began to shift. The temperature plummeted, and a low, guttural growl echoed from deep within the walls. The walls themselves seemed to warp and shift, pulling in on them from every direction. "Get out! Get out now!" Emma shouted, her heart racing in panic. But it was too late. The floor cracked open beneath them, revealing a deep chasm, a pit that seemed to stretch on forever. From the depths of the pit, a shadow began to rise, a massive form that loomed over them, twisting and writhing like a living nightmare. The entity was here. It was no longer a whisper in the walls or a shadow in the corners of their vision. It was real, tangible, and it was hungry. Sophie's lifeless body was held aloft in the air by dark tendrils that twisted from the walls. Her eyes were still wide open, but they were black, devoid of humanity. She was nothing more than a puppet, a vessel for the entity's power. "No!" Emma screamed, her voice breaking as she rushed forward. But the darkness reached out and slammed her back against the wall, pinning her in place. The entity's voice echoed through the room, a voice that was both malevolent and ancient. "You should have left. Now, you will all join me." The house shook as if it were alive, its walls groaning and screaming in agony as the entity's power grew. Emma, Luke, Jack, and Daniel were all trapped, unable to move or speak as the darkness wrapped around them like a suffocating blanket. "Emma," a voice whispered, soft and familiar. She turned, only to find Sophie standing in front of her, her eyes empty but full of sadness. "I'm so sorry," Sophie whispered, her voice hollow. "But this is the only way. It's the price we have to pay." "No!" Emma screamed. But Sophie's figure began to disintegrate, her body turning to dust before Emma's eyes. The walls of the house cracked, and the entity's form grew larger, more monstrous with each passing second. It loomed over them, its presence suffocating, its hunger palpable. Emma felt herself growing weaker, her mind slipping into darkness. But then, in the very depths of her despair, she remembered the ancient symbols on the wall. They weren't just warnings. They were a map, a guide to the source of the power. With everything she had left, Emma pushed herself forward, stumbling toward the altar that had been the center of the house's curse. The others tried to follow, but the darkness held them back. She reached out, her hand trembling, and touched the altar's stone surface. The moment she did, the world exploded in light and sound, a deafening roar that shook the very foundations of the house. The entity screamed, its form dissolving into the air as the house began to crumble around them. As the house collapsed, Emma and the others barely escaped, their bodies battered and bruised, but alive. The entity was gone, its power destroyed. But the cost was high. Sophie was gone, and the house that had once held so much terror now lay in ruins. Emma stood outside the remains of the house, her heart heavy with grief. They had escaped the darkness, but at what price? The dust of the collapsed house settled around Emma, Luke, Daniel, and Jack. The once imposing and sinister structure was now a crumbling ruin, reduced to nothing more than fragments of its former self. The eerie hum that had filled the air for so long was gone, replaced by an unsettling silence. Emma stood at the edge of the wreckage, her mind spinning with what had just transpired. They had escaped the house, but the entity had not been destroyed as easily as they had hoped. It lingered, just beneath the surface, its presence still clinging to them like a dark shadow. "Is it over?" Daniel asked, his voice hoarse, as though speaking made the reality of what had happened too much to bear. "I don't know," Emma whispered, her eyes scanning the horizon. "I thought it was. But there's something wrong. It's not over. It's still watching us." The ground beneath them trembled slightly, and the air seemed to thicken once again. Emma turned sharply, a feeling of dread surging within her. The entity hadn't just been tied to the house. It had a connection to them. To each of them. "I told you?" Sophie's voice echoed in her mind, a soft, sorrowful whisper. "I'm sorry." Emma's stomach churned as she felt the weight of Sophie's words. The entity wasn't just a force tied to the house. It had been using them, manipulating their fears and desires, feeding off their emotions. And now it had attached itself to them. "We need to leave," Jack said, his voice strained. "We need to get as far away from here as possible." They turned to leave, but Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching them, that the house itself had somehow left a parting mark on their souls. The wind howled around them, its mournful cry almost like a warning, and they hurried away from the ruins of the house, each of them haunted by the strange sensation that they were not alone. Days passed since their escape, but the strange occurrences only intensified. Emma found herself waking up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, unable to shake the feeling that someone was in the room with her. She would hear whispers just beyond her hearing, feel an icy chill in the air despite the warmth of her home. Sometimes, she could almost swear she saw the shadows move out of the corner of her eye, only for them to vanish when she looked directly at them. Jack had begun to withdraw, spending more and more time alone in his apartment. He became restless, snapping at the others when they tried to talk to him, his eyes filled with a fear that was hard to place. He claimed he heard voices, just like Emma, and that the shadows seemed to follow him, appearing even in the most mundane places. But it wasn't just Jack and Emma. Daniel had begun experiencing strange dreams, dreams that were far too vivid, too real. He would wake up with bruises on his arms, marks that seemed to appear overnight, but when he tried to explain them, everyone dismissed it as stress or sleepwalking. The group's once tight bond was beginning to unravel, each of them spiraling into their own private hell as the entity continued to toy with them. It had left the house, but it had not left them. The real terror began when Emma found a strange mark on her arm. It was small at first, just a faint bruise, but it slowly spread into something darker, something unnatural. She stared at it in horror, watching as the mark seemed to pulse, like it was alive. That night, she had the most vivid dream of all. In it, she was back in the house, standing in front of the altar. The entity stood before her, its eyes empty and filled with a terrifying void. It spoke to her in a low, guttural tone. "You belong to me now," it whispered, its voice reverberating in her mind. When Emma woke up, she was soaked in sweat, her breath coming in frantic gasps. But the mark on her arm had only deepened now, resembling a symbol she had seen carved into the walls of the house. It was a sigil of power, a mark of ownership, and it seemed to be spreading. "Emma!" Luke's voice called out to her, but she didn't respond. Her focus was on the mark. "The house is never gone," she muttered under her breath. "It never left us. It's in us now." As the days wore on, Emma's sanity began to fracture. The mark on her arm kept spreading, and the nightmares grew worse. She would wake up to find things out of place, objects moved, lights flickering, on their own, and, worst of all, the whispers that grew louder each day. She tried to tell the others, but they dismissed her concerns. Daniel was too consumed by his own fears. Luke was already drowning in his own isolation, and Jack was no better, shutting himself off completely. One night, Emma couldn't take it anymore. She stood in front of the mirror, staring at the reflection of her own face, but something was wrong. Her eyes were black, completely black. And when she blinked, she could see the entity behind her, standing in the shadows. "Please," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Leave me alone." But the figure in the mirror only grinned, a cold, hollow smile. "It's too late," it whispered. "You're mine." The house, the entity, everything had followed them. And now, it was inside them, twisting their minds, driving them mad. As Emma spiraled deeper into madness, the others began to experience similar breakdowns. Jack, unable to cope, locked himself in his apartment, refusing to leave. Daniel spent his days wandering aimlessly, unable to find peace. And Luke had begun to disappear for days at a time, returning only to speak in riddles and mutter things that made no sense. It was clear to Emma now. The entity wasn't just hunting them. It was feeding on their fear, their suffering, and as much as she wanted to escape, she realized there was no running from the truth. The entity had claimed them all, but there was a part of her that refused to give in. She couldn't let it win. She couldn't let it consume her completely. Determined, Emma returned to the ruins of the house, armed with the knowledge she had gathered from the symbol on her arm. She knew she had to face the entity one last time. This time, on her own terms. But as she stood before the collapsed remains of the house, she heard the whispers again, louder now. "You cannot escape me." Emma felt the familiar coldness of the entity's presence surround her, its shadow swallowing her whole. But this time, Emma stood firm. "Not today," she whispered, clenching her fists. And then, everything went dark. Emma stood at the entrance of the ruins, her heart pounding as she stared at the remnants of the place that had once been the source of so much terror. The wind howled around her, carrying with it the whispers of the entity, promises of torment that echoed in her ears. She could feel its presence like a weight on her chest, suffocating her. But there was something else now. A fire in her heart, a determination she hadn't felt before. She wasn't just here to face the entity. She was here to end it. For good. Behind her, Luke, Daniel, and Jack appeared, each of them looking just as haunted as Emma felt. The entity had taken so much from them, driven them to madness, torn them apart. But this time they would face it together. "We finish this tonight," Luke said, his voice hard. It was the first time he'd spoken with any conviction in days. The horrors they had endured had broken them, but now they had a common goal: to end the nightmare. Emma nodded. "Together," she said, though her voice trembled with fear. The house loomed ahead of them, the place where the entity had fed, on their terror. The dark presence inside seemed to stir, as if it recognized their resolve. They stepped into the ruins. As they entered the house, the atmosphere changed. The air grew thick with a palpable sense of dread. The shadows seemed to move on their own, stretching and twisting, reaching for them with invisible hands. The floor creaked beneath their feet, as if the house itself was alive and watching. "Them! Do you feel that?" Daniel whispered, his voice shaking. "It's different. It's stronger." The entity, once a whisper in the shadows, was now fully aware of their presence. The ground trembled, and the walls seemed to close in. Around them, the whispers grew louder, more frantic, urging them to turn back. But Emma held her ground, determined to face the horror head-on. Suddenly, a figure appeared in front of them, bathed in shadow. It was tall, twisted, its form ever shifting, as if it were not truly one being, but a collection of darkness itself. Its eyes glowed a cold, hollow white, and it grinned, a terrifying, empty smile. "You shouldn't have come back," it said, its voice a distorted whisper that echoed in their minds. "I own you. I always have." Emma took a step forward, her body trembling but her will unwavering. "No, you don't." The entity's smile widened. "We'll see." The entity's power was overwhelming, and it knew how to use their deepest fears against them. As the group ventured further into the house, the walls seemed to close in on them, and the shadows grew longer. They each began to experience terrifying hallucinations, manifestations of their worst nightmares. Emma saw Sophie, her face twisted in a grotesque expression, whispering that Emma had failed her. Luke saw his mother, long gone, accusing him of abandoning her. Daniel saw himself, a mirror image, but this version was soaked in blood, a dark reflection of everything he feared about himself. Jack saw the house, but it was alive, its walls breathing in and out like a living creature. The entity's whispers became louder, more insistent, and it seemed to twist the world around them. They were trapped, not only in the house but in their own minds. The boundaries between reality and nightmare began to blur. "You cannot escape," the entity taunted, its voice a constant presence in their minds. "You belong to me." Despite the entity's best efforts, Emma refused to give in. She remembered the symbol on her arm, the sigil that had once marked her as its victim. It was more than just a mark. It was a key to understanding the entity's true nature. "It's all about control," Emma whispered to herself. "It feeds on our fear, but we can control that. We can fight it." She turned to the others who were struggling against their own visions. "Focus. This is just in our heads. The entity can't control us if we don't let it." Slowly, one by one, they began to break free from the illusions. Luke, with a deep breath, forced himself to look past his mother's haunting image. Daniel snapped out of his hallucination, refusing to face the bloodied reflection of himself. Jack's eyes widened as he shook off the visions of the house coming alive, pushing through the terror. Together they stood strong, united against the darkness. With their collective strength, they confronted the entity. But it wasn't enough to just face it in their minds. They had to destroy it. Emma, guided by the knowledge she had gathered, realized the entity's true weakness. It was bound by the symbols and rituals that had brought it into the world. In the first place, the sigil on her arm wasn't just a mark, it was a seal that could banish the entity back into the void if used correctly. "Hold it off," Emma shouted to the others. "I need time." As the entity lashed out at them, its form shifting and writhing in fury, Emma began to chant, reciting the incantations she had learned. The house trembled violently as the entity screamed in rage, the air around them crackling with dark energy. The sigil on Emma's arm began to glow, its light brightening with every word she spoke. The ground beneath them cracked open, revealing a vast, swirling void. The entity screeched, thrashing against the power that Emma wielded. With a final, desperate cry, Emma completed the incantation, and a powerful burst of light engulfed the room. When the light faded, the house was silent. The entity was gone. The walls were still. The darkness had lifted. Emma stood there, breathing heavily, her body exhausted, but relieved. The others were safe, standing in the ruins of the house, free from the nightmare that had haunted them for so long. "We did it," Jack said, his voice breaking the silence. "It's over." But Emma knew better. The entity had been banished, yes, but the scars it had left on them would never fully heal. The horrors they had experienced would haunt them for the rest of their lives. "We survived," Emma whispered, "but we'll never forget." The group walked away from the ruins, each of them carrying the weight of their experience. The entity was gone, but the terror it had caused would live on in their memories, a constant reminder that some darkness never truly leaves.